What is happiness? Hi, I'm Mike Mason, and this is St. Joe Society podcast. The St. Joe Society is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men order all things to Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at stjosephsociety.org. This is the Intro to Moral Theology, Episode 9. And in this episode, fellas, we're going to try to answer the question, what is happiness? Now, last month, we talked about the nature of the human person. Now, what I mentioned last month and the previous was that there are two fundamental questions to Catholic moral theology, and particularly Thomistic moral theology, which follows Thomas Aquinas. To know how to perfect a thing or make a thing better, you have to know two basic things about it. One, what it is, and two, what it's for. And so last month, we talked about what is a human being, and we discovered a human being is a soul-body composite, that we have certain powers and appetites that come with that, including the power of intellect and will, the concupiscible appetite, which is the appetite for pleasurable goods, and the irascible appetite, which is the appetite for difficult goods. We talked about what it was like for Adam and Eve in the garden, so we could get a clear picture on kind of what God wanted for us initially. And then we looked at what happened with original sin, because we have to understand kind of, what we are, our original situation, and what went wrong to understand the pathway back to where we're going. Well, what we're going to do this month is to actually talk about where are we going, okay? What is the point of the moral life, okay? And the way I want to tackle this is this week we're going to talk about what happiness is in general, okay? And I'm going to argue that happiness is our natural end, okay? So what we want in the core of our being is to be happy, and we're going to talk about that from a natural perspective. What question we're going to leave off with at the end of today's episode is, okay, we want to be happy. What object can bring us happiness? And before we jump to the Christian answer to that, which is God, he's the answer, we're going to look at 4 non-Christian approaches to happiness. So we'll cover 2 next week. We're going to cover hedonism and utilitarianism. And then the week after that, we're going to cover Stoicism and evolutionism. And what we're going to do with those investigations is we're going to see, what those approaches are and then why, in my mind, they're deficient. Before finally in week 4, we'll turn our attention to the Catholic and Christian answer to the happy and good life, which is what's called the beatific vision. And that's the vision of God we get in heaven. So in the 4th episode, I'll make that argument. But today we're just going to look at what happiness is. Okay. So where should we begin? Let's start with the fact that Thomistic moral theology is teleological. Okay. Now I do try to keep the terms at a minimum when we do these podcasts, but it's hard to get around them. And, I paid good money for the education. So you got to use the term sometimes. What teleological means, okay, teleology picks out the fact that there is purpose or direction in the world. Okay. So when you say the world is teleological, what you're saying is that when God designed the universe, he designed it with certain goals in mind. Okay. Let me give you a couple examples. Let's say the teleology of a pencil. Okay. A teleology of the pencil is that a pencil is for writing. Okay. The teleology of a car is for transportation. The teleology for sex is for procreation, stuff like that. So what teleology picks out is that we are made for a certain end. Now, in Thomistic moral theology, and really, more broader virtue ethics, Catholic moral theology, determining what's the final end or what's the purpose of human actions is a core concept to Catholic moral theology. Okay. So we need to determine where are we going? What's the point of this so that we can put our actions in context and then be in a good position to judge if they're good or bad. Okay. So knowing what a human being is, we can see that some things are good for humans and some are bad, but we also have to know where they're for and where they're going as well. And that's what we're going to talk about this month. Okay. Now, the reason why we're teleological, one of the reasons is that we have an intellect and a will. Okay. Now let's kind of go back to last week when we talked about what an intellect and will do. An intellect is the ability to think, right? To think abstractly about speculative sort of things, and also to think about practical stuff, like how to achieve certain goals and ends and things like that. We also are creatures that have a will. Okay. So we have an intellect that can think and a will that pursues what is good. So when a person's doing a properly human act, what they're doing is they're seeing something they think is good, right? They perceive as good for them. And then their will is electing to do that sort of thing. Okay. Human beings are attracted to goals that we think are going to perfect us. Okay. And this is one of the key insights into virtue theory and the type ethics we're studying, is that we are always aiming towards what we think is good for us. Okay. Always. All right. And I do want to, define a few terms to kind of unpack this a little bit more. Defining terms is one of those things that can sometimes be one of the more dull things you have to do in philosophy and theology, but it's also like ridiculously important. But let's look at 3 terms I'm going to be using a whole bunch, and we can kind of get on the same page what I mean by these. Okay. When I talk about working for an end of something, what I mean by that is I'm just using end as in the term of a goal. Okay. An end or a goal is that for the sake of which something is done. Okay. So everything you do is directed at some sort of goal or end. Okay. Either approximately, like right in front of you, or ultimately, okay, maybe something in the distance, but everything we do has a purpose. That's what I mean by an end. So when I say the end of human life, that's what I'm referring to. Okay. Also, when I use the term good, okay, the good, Aristotle defines it as that which all things aim. Okay. What the term good picks out in the thing is that it's ability to perfect something or make something better. Goodness picks out the desirability of something. So when someone says, I'm going to start jogging because it's good for me, what they mean is the activity of jogging is going to perfect them in some way. Okay. Now let's bring these 2 terms back to what I was saying about our intellects and wills and such. When we make choices, okay, we're goal-oriented creatures, right? We can think about long-term goals, short-term goals, and then means to get there. Okay. Guys, we pursue ends or goals because we think they're going to perfect us. And the fact we think that we're perfect us, we call those, that's what it means for them to be good. So if you notice here, every single goal is a good in some way, and every good is a goal, okay, in some way. All right. Because if something wasn't good, we wouldn't pursue it. Now, I do have to give one qualification here, and it's probably something you guys, maybe an objection that was raised in your mind as I was talking. It's really important to distinguish between an apparent and an actual good. Okay. Sometimes people think something is good for them, but it's actually not. Okay. That's an apparent good. Okay. So let's say a guy who decides to commit adultery. Okay. Something in him says committing adultery is a good act, at least for him. Okay. So maybe it's the pleasure he's getting out of it. Maybe it's the escapism, whatever. The adultery appears to him like a good choice, but it's actually not a good choice. Okay. It's actually evil. And in future episodes, I'll kind of unpack how that happens, how we're deceived by certain things in more depth. But what I want you to see is that there is a difference between apparent and actual goods. So apparent goods seem to be good, but they're actually not. Actual goods appear to be good, okay, and they actually are. Okay, that's kind of the base fundamental thing. So as thinking creatures with intellects and wills, okay, we set goals, we determine those goals to be good, and then we pursue them. So what then would happiness be? Happiness is when we desire some goal, we put in work to achieve that goal, right? We do actions to achieve that goal. When we achieve the goal, when we receive that good, we are happy. Okay, kind of the technical definition. Happiness is desire. So it's when you have a desire, but your desire is satisfied by possessing the object of your desire. Okay, so you're not happy when you're thinking about eating a cheeseburger. You're happy when you actually eat it. You're not happy when you think about marrying your wife. You're happy when she says, I do. Okay. So what happiness is it is actually possessing the thing that you want. Okay. So notice here, let's recap a little bit. Teleology means that our lives are ordered by God to certain goals. We pursue certain goals because we perceive that they are good for us, and we are happy when we embrace them. Okay. That's kind of the basic nutshell of what we said so far. Okay. Now, one little caveat to all this. As you guys notice, happiness, okay, can be imperfect or perfect. Things like cheeseburgers or getting married or winning a state championship in football, okay, those are imperfect goods. And so therefore they only deliver imperfect happiness. What do I mean by imperfect? I don't mean imperfect in the sense of that they're bad, okay? What I mean is they are finite temporal goods. So when you eat a cheeseburger or $100 steak, what's going to happen in 5 or 6 hours? You're going to get hungry again, because the goodness in those sort of things is an imperfect goodness, okay? Because it doesn't last forever. That same thing's true for things like family and success and money and stuff like that. These are all imperfect. Now, again, imperfect doesn't mean bad. It just means that those objects are not infinite. They're not eternal, okay? They're not perfect. So the happiness you get from them is imperfect happiness. Again, not bad, just imperfect. The question for us is there such a thing as perfect happiness? All right. For Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas and the Christian tradition, they all teach that we were made for perfect happiness. Okay. And I'm going to give you guys a brief argument why we should think that perfect happiness is real. Okay. That it can actually be the case. Okay. So, real quick argument. I'll just walk you through it, non-technical way. First, simple observation. All men desire perfect happiness. All right, that's pretty straightforward, okay? All of us, if we could, would love to be perfectly happy. Our desires and our appetites and all these sort of things, they're never fully satisfied, but they want to be, okay? Because the second they're satisfied, they want more and more and more, okay? So first premise, men desire perfect happiness, okay? The question is this desire artificial? Is it just like made up? It's just a matter of psychology? Or is our desire for perfect happiness natural to us as human beings? Well, I want to say it's natural, and here's why. First, it's universal. All men, without exception, want to be perfectly happy. Two, it's unavoidable. Our desire to be happy is something that starts pretty much immediately, the second we can think, and it persists our entire life, and it's irresistible, which means you can't turn it off, okay? So this universal, unavoidable, irresistible aspect to our desire for perfect happiness shows that it's a natural desire. It just comes with what it means to be human, okay? So it seems pretty evident that our desire for perfect happiness comes with being human, all right? Third premise, if it's a natural desire, it must be implanted in us, in our very nature, by God. Now, why would I say that? Because God is the creator of us. He's the creator of our nature. So if the desire for perfect happiness is a natural desire, well, then it had to come from somewhere. And the person it comes from is the author of nature, which is God himself. There's premise 3. Premise 4, a desire implanted in human nature by God cannot be put there for frustration. It has to be put there for fulfillment. It does not make any sense, not with God's character or anything else, that he would put a natural desire in us that he does not intend to fulfill. Okay, that would violate his character as being true and good and all power, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so the fact that we have this natural desire to be happy and God's the one that put it there, it means he must have a plan to fulfill this thing. The fulfillment of this desire, the attainment of perfect happiness, is the goal of human life, because everything else, as I'll argue over the next 2 weeks, falls under that thing. Everything. Okay. Everything else we do serves our desire to be perfectly happy, not the other way around. Okay. So what we've come to at the end of this episode, and I'm going to wrap it up here, is we've talked about the fact that with our intellect and will, we can set goals that we perceive are good for us. We work towards them. And when we acquire those objects or achieve those goals, it makes us happy. Now, we talked about the fact that happiness can be imperfect or perfect. Goods of this world can only deliver imperfect happiness. Not bad, just imperfect and incomplete. But we have a desire for perfect happiness. This perfect happiness, it appears, was placed in us by God as our creator, and he wants to fulfill that thing. The fulfillment of the desire for perfect happiness is the point of life. That is the goal. So when we're doing all this moral theology, all this spiritual theology, all this stuff we're going to do over the next months and years, all of it is aimed after becoming perfectly happy. The task of moral theology is to outline how to do that. Okay. And that's what this podcast is about, is how do we achieve our proper end, which is being perfectly happy with God in heaven. And the with God in heaven part, we're going to cover in 3 weeks. But where we're going to turn next week is we're going to look at non-Christian approaches to happiness, because everybody acknowledges we want to be happy. What are the non-Christian approaches? Why are they deficient? And then we're going to turn to the answer. So we're going to wrap it up there. I hope you guys have a blessed week. I'll see you next week. God bless.